light's so bright.
Feels like everyone came to see a movie.
Where's the popcorn? Does everybody have popcorn? All right. Welcome, everybody, to the launch of the Human Protocol podcast. Stani, welcome as first guest for the launch. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you. Big honor.
The honor is all mine. Just for context, the Human Protocol podcast is all about the personal side of building big things. My interest as somebody who's been in the space for 9 years is what it actually felt like to build the things that we constantly talk about. We constantly talk about the alpha, we constantly talk about the success and the dramas, et cetera, et cetera. I don't really care about that. I want to know who the people are behind the big projects. And again, what that arc is, what the personal arc, the personal lessons, the personal stories are all about. So that's context for everybody. All right, let's get going. I would love to know a little bit about who you were before you were Stani, the founder of Aave Labs. We can go as far back as you want. We can go to Estonia, Finland, your dad getting you the computer, hacking on Linux, dropping out, whatever you want to start with.
Yeah, my first question was like how far I should go, but maybe yeah. I mean, when I was growing up, like online and computers were a big thing, and it started with a broadband connection, and I think one of the first things I took really seriously online was playing Counter-Strike.
Okay.
That was I don't know how many of you guys have played Counter-Strike. Okay, it's very mature audience. That means that I spend a lot of time on computers, and while you weren't playing, you were doing some different things. And I lived with my older brother, who was 5 years older. He was very excited about operating systems like Linux and really understanding kernels and contributing to those communities. I was more interested in kind of like web, internet, and the access it provided. And for me, it was really interesting because I kind of felt when internet started to pick up more that like it sort of puts all the businesses and opportunities under the same kind of like a flat level playing field.
Okay.
So you go to a website and you don't know if it's if that's kind of like a website or application is a business with 4,000 people or 4 people,
Okay.
And at that time, obviously it was very early. So, things like buying online was not as smooth as possible. Like, for example, as like putting credit card details and trusting Stripe and whatnot. Like it was before that. So doing anything with a credit card online, you were kind of like
Risking.
Yeah, pretty much like how people feel with maybe crypto today still a bit, and DeFi and so forth. So what was interesting for me is that you could actually build these applications, and I started with very simple stuff like websites, and then started to use more PHP programming, and at some point it became more interesting because you started to see more like web frameworks to build really like a
More complex?
complex and product-like applications on web. And I think I was like 16 at that point when Ruby on Rails was a big thing, and I think Twitter also, X now, was built originally with that in mindset. And that was kind of like the Web 2.0 movement. And I used to be at a sports high school, and my dad was very into like sports, and,
Yes.
and so somewhat it made me into sports. And and at that point, like after first year of high school, I kind
You
of
were like,
I dropped out
Yeah.
basically, and just started to program like every day. Basically, I even left home in the morning, just pretending going to school,
how long did you hide that for?
like a year.
Whoa. Okay, what was the pushback from your family when you dropped out? Oh, first of all, when they found out that after a year you hadn't been to school. Was that a little bit
I think they kind of were worried, but also like they didn't care much. Not that my parents didn't care, but you know, I had a lot of freedom in my life and when I was
Okay.
growing up, so I think they were like less concerned, and I just came up with reasons and just to continue programming. And I think then I did like a lot of applications. Like I tried to build anything that I could imagine, and reusing a lot of like templates and code. And I think it was until like early 20s when I actually started to like build a startup.
Okay.
And at that point, it was more of a like a fintech platform. It was a time when like crowdfunding, peer-to-peer lending
Was really,
taking off.
yes.
Like marketplace economies, and I was building this marketplace where you could actually buy receivables as an investor, diversify your portfolio, and that funding goes to fund businesses for invoice financing. Very like nerdy and fintechy solution.
What attracted you to that? Like out of everything that you could build, why that?
I think I felt that finance wasn't evolved enough on the web, and I think that there was a lot that was already built. Like there was really like e-commerce was working pretty well. You could order anything online. Then also social was already like taking off quite a lot, and like a lot of use cases. But finance was, I think it was like the last slow moving bastion at that point. And it was even like before any mobile banking or any of the like Revoluts and whatnot. And like banking and finance felt like brick and mortar and financial services in general. So I was convinced that, you know, this is a field that is going to move quite a lot. And once I started to actually build some of the stuff, I realized why it actually didn't move, because of regulation and the complexity, and especially with the compliance and regulation, it was a really shit show. It was really hard to understand like what was what was legal and what not. Like what is the gray area. And at that time, especially like peer-to-peer lending, crowdfunding started to get regulated across Europe, like basically member country after member country. And I think for me that was really painful, because you have to spend a lot of resources for like legal fees, and you have this uncertainty, and eventually you are trying to build like a accessible financial application that is useful. And then you're sort of like broken down into regions. So I found it a really bit challenging, and obviously at that point we failed, which was pretty okay. And
was that good? Were you just, you know what, this is fine, close down this chapter, because realistically in this space, the way it is right now, there's no moving the needle the way you would want it to?
Yeah, I wasn't too worried, because we didn't have that many customers or users, so didn't have to send many emails. And I think it was really easy to close, because I've done so many of these different applications beforehand, and just like left them online to be used, and move to the next thing that is more viable. And yeah, it wasn't a hard decision at all. It was frustrating to see how hard it was to build the stuff, and I tried to learn a lot about compliance, a lot about the regulatory frameworks, and then when I stopped, I actually wanted to go then to uni, and instead of computer science, I wanted to study law, because I really wanted to understand the legal frameworks, compliance, and also
Okay.
basically the commercial side. To get into law school, I had to actually go back to high school, and it sucked because you were like in your 20s and everyone else were like, 16.
Yeah. Did you
16,
do it?
17. Yeah, I had to go there, and
How many years? 3? No. 2?
well, it was a 3-year program.
Okay.
But I did it in 6 months,
Okay.
and I did it in a like a brute force tactic. So there's exams every couple of months. So you just take as many books as possible and as many exams, and you just try to pass them.
Okay.
Like that was the strategy, and that's how I got it in completion really quickly.
6 months. Nice. Was that
Brute
intense?
force works really well.
This is it. Like, when you need it, you need it. What was that like? Was it exciting? And was it like, okay, I'm going to go do this real quick, get into law, sort out the financial system?
Well, in Finland, where I'm from, it's actually interesting, the whole educational system, because kind of like all the applicants are like competing from the same positions.
Okay.
Because the education is free, right? So you have to like try to get into a school.
Yes.
And these high demand programs, then obviously like you might try like every year. Maybe you get into the first, second, third, or fifth or sixth. I was lucky enough to get on the second year, and it was actually pretty nice, because end of my studies I was really trying to think about like what to do next.
Okay.
Coming closer to graduation, and I was reading a lot of Reddit at that time, and I stumbled upon to the Ethereum subreddit.
Yep.
And I was reading a lot about it, and I was like, this is interesting, and I saw a lot of like very early like financial like dApps, like decentralized applications that were very like very primitive at that point. And I was reading more about this, and I was like, well, this is actually, you actually can build finance, but in a completely environment where you have permissionless access, so you don't need to ask for API keys, and you don't need to really have this sort of like restrictions. Like it feels borderless, and the idea of the governance, and you just need a wallet, and you can interact, and everything is transparent. And that really blew my mind, because this is what finance should be.
Yep.
Without all these restrictions, like regionality and bottlenecks, you can actually truly just innovate on programmable finance. And that's just like, at that point I was hooked.
Was the hooking almost immediate because you had all done this in the real world, standard world, and then you saw this possibility instantly? What was the time frame of getting onto the subreddit and then being like, I need to build here?
Yeah, so the things that I was building in fintech was, like borderless and trying to like really have a global audience. And this was actually the environment where you could do that very efficiently. And I started to think about ideas, and mainly related to finance and lending, because that was what I've done in the past. And then I was thinking that it could be interesting if you can just do a whole like end-to-end loan on the smart contracts and use those benefits, but in a way that a borrower has a incentives to pay it back.
Okay.
So at that point, we made a small proof of concept where we kept basically tokens as a collateral, years in 20s, and you borrow Ethereum and Ether. And at that point, so it was 16, 17, like at that point there wasn't stable coins on Ethereum. So it was very, very early. And that was the sort of a proof of concept.
Okay. So then let's move to the moment where you start building this, the proof of concept, and then ETHLend, and then ETHLend starts getting traction. What does that feel like when you are suddenly responsible for all of this money and its security, and it's on you to make sure that everything works and doesn't break?
I mean, it's horrible. It is really not a great responsibility, and I'm also wondering how other DeFi founders think about this and feel about it, but and developers particularly, because you sort of like the blockchain tests your confidence all the time, and and sometimes things can be out of your control.
Yep.
So it's something that you have to have like a way of thinking about it and processing. But it is a something that changed the approach of like, this is not anymore experimentation. This is actually a significant product or a protocol that is being used by other people. So there is value, like, and you have to think what's best for the users. And you definitely change your mind about like that you really have there something that people are using, and you need to ensure it's very resilient.
How many sleepless nights? How tired were you during that time, and how stressed? Because I want to normalize, like, maybe, that intense process of building something that then becomes one of the biggest projects. Like, what did that cost you? What did you go through?
Yeah, I mean, it is really hard. I think every protocol iteration, what we build between, whether it's like ETLN or V1, 2, 3, and 4, like, it's really, the whole team is putting a lot of energy into it, and all our kind of like a partners and so forth. Like, it is something which really gets everyone heads down for a very long period of time, and focusing on all the nitty-gritty details and edge cases and whatnot. So it is definitely like the one of the most hardest things ever we do, and the whole process. And we probably have like a protocol iteration every like a couple of years, and maybe V3 has been around for a few years, but V2 we already been building it and designing and thinking about it for over 2 years. So it is a really like place where like you have to just put your whole mind into it across the team, and it is definitely not easy. And I think protocol development is one of the most difficult things to do. Like, if there's no shortcuts, basically, like you have to really think everything up to the smallest rounding. There's a lot, but there's also great people that help us, so we're not alone there.
And obviously now you have a big team, and let's say the responsibility is shared. Do you still feel that very intense personal responsibility for it all, the same way as you did in the beginning?
Oh yeah, but also I think that it is a shared responsibility, that you have to have everyone in the team that really cares what they're doing and puts 100% on the table. But yeah, you're always it's your face that is like out there. Yeah. So but I do think that it is a team effort, and it's one of the most difficult things to do. So like there's shared ownership over that.
With regards to, again, the evolution of things, because Aave is such a big player, one of the biggest in our space.
The biggest.
Pardonnez-moi. What does that do to your ability? Because again, that personal responsibility, and you're the face, and you are the one who is talking about it and interacting with everybody. And we see you at so many conferences, just interacting with people all the time. Have you learned to put any boundaries in place so that your energy doesn't all just go endlessly towards this in these past few years?
I would like to say yes, but the answer is no. Like I feel like I think it is a very open community, and one of the best things in our ecosystem is that you might have a conversation somewhere during this event, for example, and you get new ideas, or you make new basically new friends, and I think that is really refreshing, and I think it's also a place where there's a lot of people, but there's also a good amount of signal and really interesting ideas that people are talking about, and there's a lot also a lot of builders, and one of the ideas for V4 was that we can open up the whole architecture for everyone to come and actually contribute and build new things.
Okay.
Because it's more modular, it means that you can actually use Aave's liquidity to build and extend the protocol to new use cases, and I meet a lot of developers, and I think those discussions are really really valuable. I do have some boundaries though. Maybe I'm trying to more be careful with the time. Especially when like you're getting older and you have a family, you're trying to like at least regulate the time how you spend, or at least prioritize. I think that's something I'm trying to work towards. But yeah, I'm still a mess when it comes to that.
To like dividing your time.
Oh yeah.
Because you brought up family, obviously, yes, you became a father in this time and so on. What has that changed your perspective in any way on what you're doing, what you want to build? Does that responsibility now extend to your children and what they will experience out in the world? How is that kind of changed? And also, to the point that we were making earlier, Stani, founder of Aave Labs, talking to everybody, sharing his time so generously versus Stani at home. How do they coexist?
No, I think having family always, I think it helps, definitely gives a perspective for life, but also, prioritization, because in somehow like, we grew up in the space, right? So like almost a decade ago, we were here.
Yep.
And I think that's you kind of like have to think, what is the next thing, and the space evolves, right, all the time. So a decade ago, it was very early,
yes,
early builders, and a lot of experimentation. Now you see more even like institutions really trying to understand how to use DeFi, and fintechs integrating DeFi. So like it's getting more professional, and more you see more adoption, and there's better tooling to even build towards mainstream. And so you kind of like have to grow up with the space and think about prioritization. And besides that, and also like the time management obviously is important, but I still feel like the whole space is always online, and sometimes I kind of wish that there will be office hours.
Okay. 9 to 5?
Yeah,
9 to 10.
Let's say like once a month the whole space agrees, nothing happens, but obviously that's impossible.
It is. But I like the fact that at least like at this point you're like, you know what, I would like some downtime. Just a little bit quiet, touch grass, spend time with the kids and so on.
Yeah, it's also hard because like when you're locked in, you also like want to dedicate
yes
to what you're building. And I think also the reason for that is that there's so little being built. Like in one way, you look at DeFi and you see that there's AMMs, lending protocols,
yes,
stable coins, but it's really still early. I think that's, if we think about the size of DeFi at 130 to 200 billion, it's still nothing. And RWA is at 20, 30 billion. That's also like even less. That's just like a drop in the ocean of what the whole financial like finance overall and financial infrastructure has in terms of value locked in. So I think that's in this whole like a process we're quite early. So it feels like now is actually the best time to build, and I think that's it's also a very rewarding time because we'll see actually more adoption. So you don't necessarily need to build infrastructure,
Yes.
but also like more on the integration layers and products, and there's a lot to do there. And I think that's why I keep telling a lot of founders that actually like when they ask about the early days of DeFi, that actually now is much more exciting because so many things are happening. There's more clarity also somewhat in the regulation, and that's going to just keep improving. And also with AI, there's also another dimension to our space completely, which is really interesting.
So you're definitely still inspired and excited to build. Was there ever a time where you thought about quitting?
I mean, it gets really hard quite often, to be honest, too often. And, at that point, you sort of like, you get frustrated. Not necessarily like quitting itself, but you kind of, wish that things are like easier.
Yep.
But it comes from the fact that this is a very like a specialized space. There's a lot of things happening. I think there's a lot of noise as well, especially like on social media.
Yeah.
Like I think maybe like 95% or more even is noise. So it's sometimes kind of like a distracting. Even though there's some good takes, but a lot of bad takes.
Yep.
But a lot of relevant discussions, I think, as well. But it's sort of important for every founder and team not to get caught up into any of the noise and trying to understand what's important to build and not chasing narratives or the meta and just like building viable products is something where the focus should be always. And it's not always easy because, there's communities, there's investors, there might be like token holders and everyone has an idea. So yeah, the focus is really important to always have.
How do you achieve that? Because you mentioned the noise and you mentioned the dramas and you mentioned the distractions. How do you deal with that? How do you keep focus? And also, in general, how have you learned to deal with conflict?
I mean, it's conflicts are also depending what they are, but sometimes there are opinions, and you just have to like figure out what's the best opinions, and you don't want to end up with compromises because most likely compromises are, something that satisfies everyone might satisfy no one. And that's something I think there's more value in being opinionated and having a direction and going to that direction versus building something that is middle ground for everyone. And that doesn't lead to anywhere. So I think it's important to lead and showing the way. And the way we do that is by building and building. If something doesn't work, we rebuild things and recreate, and it's a constant evolution, right? So what worked for in 2017 doesn't work in 2020 or 2025, and you have to constantly keep innovating.
And then to your point again with the focus and not getting distracted, do you feel that's something that you have learned to do? Were you as good at doing that in the beginning? Like, I want to hear some lessons that you've learned in these past 10 years, right? What is Stani from the beginning and Stani now? What are some lessons that you've learned?
Yeah, I think that's something that's probably the hardest thing ever. And maybe to most people even. Like, it's really hard to be good at focusing on things because, again, there's just like so many stakeholders and so much discussion and things moving and typically if you're building a product, you might have any users in the beginning and you might wonder why, right? And and then you read that some another project got some sort of like traction, like a new perps exchange, right?
Yes.
And everyone is building perps. Then there's interesting yield-bearing stablecoin. Everyone's building yield-bearing stablecoins. So this is a really like a dangerous path, right? Because I think in most cases, like it just takes time to iterate, to get a good product and grow that product and also like have a really good way of flywheels and whatnot. And and even like experienced founders might make that same mistake again by not focusing. But also you need to understand when you kind of need to kill something and move on and rebuild. And I think the best thing to do is to talk to users directly, not asking like what people think in the crypto Twitter or
Yes.
Or investors or even your friends, but going like to the people that actually are using the stuff you built, and that gives actually way better signal than anything else.
And do you think there's a degree of patience that you need to have?
Oh my God, yeah. And it's so hard probably, like, I think our space has a weird problem of like seeing results on the same day,
Yeah.
like immediately. And there's like a zero patience of actually letting, things just mature and building things and long term. And this is something that people need to speak publicly and openly about, because it's also like a setting of like that somehow has been evolving this way. And I don't think it needs to be this way. Like if founders and developers are more vocal about things like, how they think about building long term and building the value, this sort of noise also could disappear to a large extent, I think. So that is a big problem, and it's also a huge distraction for many, in my opinion. Yeah, I think so.
Do you think that ends up being, because again, now it's really important, like you're saying, for other founders to actually normalize that, let it build, let it kind of accumulate and give it that long term versus panicking short term. Do you feel that some founders have made those mistakes and have pivoted or have done things reactively, versus like letting it, staying focused and letting it take its time and then get to the value?
Yeah, I think there is definitely that. I've seen like a very quick pivots, but also sometimes you need to pivot as soon as possible.
Right.
So finding the reason for that. So like, let's say like, if you have users that are saying something else, that they want and they won't use your product, anymore, or, especially if you don't see retention, it might be so that you have to pivot. But sometimes it might also be that you just need to build closer to the users and trying to understand what's missing and building around that. And also obviously build the right thing. So if you build for 5 users and you're trying to build a company, you're going to charge those 5 users quite a lot to keep the lights on, right? So you need to also be smart of like, what are you having conviction as well? And it comes probably the best of by using things and finding like it's very hard to solve a theoretical problem that, something is missing, but it doesn't come from your own like usage or kind of like experience.
So it has to be done through practice and then having that focus. Yeah.
I think so, because solving like a theoretical challenges, like it can work as well. I'm saying it doesn't, but I just think that like if it was a problem for you, maybe it's a problem for somewhere else, and the problem really well because you suffered the problem, and then you have a solution. And I mean, for me, for example, having tokens. And being able to unlock liquidity, that was a really simple problem, because you couldn't go to a bank; they won't lend against Bitcoin or Ethereum. Probably like still, they don't. So there is sort of like opportunity there. And obviously, like doing it in a very decentralized way is much more harder. And that's why centralized lenders, crypto lenders, were taking off before DeFi, even though ETHLend and Aave started before, because you had this sort of technical gap and you had to fulfill and learn more about what the users' behaviors and what they wanted to have from the product.
I'm curious if there is now one rule, and then I'll also loop this in. Is there something that you've wanted to say publicly and haven't yet, or haven't found the right space? And also, if this helps, is there any rule that you have now that you kind of, I don't know, live by, work by, any kind of insight that you were like, you know what, this needs to be said?
Yeah, maybe for like one of the rules that I have is I try to force myself to talk to people about potential ideas and solutions, and not trying to always try to kind of like resolve my own thinking, because it helps to give a lot of perspective, and maybe someone has a better view. And most likely that's the case. Yeah, that's something that is quite important. And then I think no one really talks about kind of like you know, like there's obviously like you know, it is a bear market, right? In some ways. And I think people don't realize or talk about publicly about like how important Ethereum is, and kind of like as a, you know, like a value system that has been created. And you know, if you think about like all the technologies and everything that exists, Ethereum as a blockchain probably will exist forever in a way where it's going to always have utility. Things might change, like obviously like internet economy evolves, AI evolves, and a lot of new technology will be introduced, but the concept of having a resilient and secure way to transact will be always here, regardless of the technical innovation. It will be just maybe in a new form of Ethereum, basically. So I don't think people realize like what has been built over the decade, and how far and how good Ethereum as a network actually is. And everyone is focusing on sort of like the markets and nitty-gritty details, and you know, is Ethereum, you know, valuable, useful, blah blah blah, like a lot of this noise that I was talking about earlier. But it is like a really resilient system that doesn't have downtime, and people need to realize how, you know, amazing this achievement actually is, and then you can build stuff on top. So I don't think people really realize how far we have been able to travel
In a relatively short space of time.
Yeah, and people give too much of like, they don't give enough credit for developers that have been contributing into Ethereum development, and also like how kind of you know, rigorous thing it is to build a secure system that is securing like tens of billions. And that's something that we have to, I want to talk about a little bit more in the future as well, and also like get people to also talk about it.
And that element of gratitude?
Yeah, and gratitude, but also like realization of like, kind of like, this is the value chain that you know, can be the backbone of all finance, the same as Aave is for lending and borrowing. Ethereum is underlying for all the value. And I think it's still very early, but you know, the world will transition into this direction, and it doesn't need you know, it doesn't need Vitalik, or it doesn't need anyone else, but you know, people need to understand that that system exists and it's built towards that direction. So yeah, gratitude, but also the fact that how actually good tech it is.
is that the main thing that kind of keeps you, because it's also a question that I want to be asking is, what is inspiring you and what is motivating you to keep going and, again, realize this promise of everything that we've been building?
Yeah, I think innovation typically is the thing, like finding that what new things can be built. I think that's something that keeps me going, and figuring out like new ways of using Aave and things that can be built in DeFi. Also seeing like DeFi getting integrated more to mainstream. We have an integration with Wob recently, an e-commerce platform. 21 million users have access to Aave through Plasma and Veta. Like that's like a really exciting thing. So we'll see probably more DeFi integrations into fintechs and traditional finance. So that's really motivating. Also, the best motivator for me is seeing builders that come and actually have built something on Aave, and especially with Aave v4, there's dozen of teams that I met just in during the launch date on Monday that were building spokes. And the crazy thing is that because the code is public, a lot of these spokes were ready, so different kinds of lending use cases. And I think that's the whole power of building and operating in public, is that you see these developers just spending time on your work.
Nice. Okay. Any final thoughts that you want to share? Anything that you feel would be useful from you, Stani, the human building the big thing, that you feel they should kind of, or not should, but it would be good for them to keep in mind, whether they're at the beginning of their journey, in the middle, at the end, because they're fallen into a little bit of a pessimistic market spiral? What do you think what would you want to share?
Yeah, I would say like first and foremost, like fuck the markets. It's like we're building products and tech. And I think it is a marathon, not a sprint.
Yes.
So it takes quite a lot of time, and I think most important is to build things with people that are nice, and that you have really good chemistry and can build things, because that can go really far actually. And it's better to do this like kind of like for fun, but in a way that you're trying to achieve something. That makes it really a great journey. And the last thing, the only thing I want to say is that DeFi will win.
Stani, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. The Human Protocol, episode 001.